Hi, my name is Barry Doyle. I'm a lawyer in Chicago. Today we're going to be talking about 4 things that you should be doing after an on-the-job accident. These are things that if you don't do, really can create a lot of problems for you and put your rights to get benefits at risk. It's important information for anybody who is in the kind of occupation where you're exposed to on-the-job accident. If you can hit share, this is going to be good information that's going to be good for anybody who's in that kind of occupation. And if you circulate it, we're going to be able to help more people avoid having a lot of unnecessary problems with workers' compensation cases. So there are 4 things that you really should be doing after an on-the-job accident. And not doing any of these 4 things can create a lot of problems and can actually put your right to get your basic workers' comp benefits at risk. This includes payment of 2/3 your average weekly wage while you're off work, payment of your medical expenses, and a lump sum settlement for permanency that's associated with the injury. If you put your right to get these benefits at risk, it's something that could potentially cost you thousands of dollars over the life of your claim and really make recovering from an on-the-job accident that much more difficult. So let's talk about a real common kind of scenario that happens to truck drivers in particular a lot. You're getting ready to tarp down a load, and you're getting the tarps out, and you do something to tweak your low back, and it's something that you notice it right away and you hope it's going to get better, but it doesn't. And over the next couple of days it seems to get worse and worse until you get to the point where you really decide that you need to do something about it. Like I said, it's a real common kind of scenario, and there are 4 things that you really should be doing to really preserve your rights to get workers' compensation benefits. First of these is to really get the details down as to what actually happened. Take note of where you were, how things happened, get names of witnesses to what happened. It sounds kind of funny to say you need to know where things happened, but I talked to a truck driver about a month ago who pulled over to the side of the road to check something out. And while he was getting back into his car, he stepped into his truck. He stepped in a hole, twisted his knee, and ultimately is going to need knee surgery. And he wasn't sure then whether he fell in Kentucky or in Illinois. And those are things that could make a world of difference, because Kentucky has a very, quote unquote, business friendly workers' compensation system where it's very hard to get workers' comp benefits that are really worthwhile. Illinois, on the other hand, has one that is relatively balanced and actually gives people who are hurt on the job a fair shake after they've been hurt. So, knowing where you've been hurt is important, especially when you don't necessarily get care right away. And, given the nature of what truck drivers do, you're here, there, and everywhere. And sometimes, it can be hard to remember exactly where you were when something happened, when you're dealing with it days or weeks later. So getting the details down is the first thing that you really want to be careful to do. Get names of witnesses, where things happen, if there's a piece of equipment or something else that contributed to cause the accident, you want to take note of what that was. So that's number 1, is get the details down. Number 2 is you want to report the accident in a timely way to your employer. There are a couple of reasons for it. The first is a basic legal one, and that's that Illinois has a notice requirement as part of the workers' compensation statutes of limitation. Your employer has to have notice of the accident within 30 days of the date of injury. And if you don't give your employer notice in that kind of a time frame, what happens then is that your rights to get benefits really are at risk, because you've blown a statute of limitations. Above and beyond that, even if you make that 30-day cutoff, but you wait 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks to actually report the accident, what happens then is that what I refer to as the index of suspicion goes up. In other words, they start to really doubt that you suffered an on-the-job injury, and they start thinking, well, maybe he did this at home. Maybe, this happened some other way where we're not going to be covered for it. Maybe it's a situation where he's just feeling old and beat up and wants to take advantage and, quote unquote, game the system. And what happens then is that when that index of suspicion goes up, the chances of you being put through what's called the Special Investigations Unit or the Fraud Unit goes up, and your claim is going to have a much more difficult lifeline. You're going to be subjected to more IMEs. There's going to be a lot more scrutiny given. You're going to be at risk for having your benefits cut off at some point. It's going to be defended very aggressively, and you don't want to have that index of suspicion go up by not timely reporting an accident to your employer. Now, who you report it to is not a real specific thing. It can be just as simple as calling it into dispatch. But when you call it in, you want to keep track of who it is that you called it into, when you called it in, and what was said. You want to be accurate in reporting what happened. If there was some other piece of equipment or some other person who was involved in causing this, you want to make sure that they know. I represented a truck driver years ago who slipped on vegetable oil on a loading dock and fell off the loading dock. And one of the big issues that kind of came up in his case was his initial report to his employer was that he just fell off the loading dock. There wasn't any mention of this leaking crate of vegetable oil that made the loading dock very slippery and caused him to fall off. So, these are all things that are going to be very important to you. Now, there's nothing in the workers' compensation statute in Illinois that actually requires you to fill out a written report. But your employer may require that as part of the employer-employee relationship, where they can require that. And if you're going to fill out an accident report, you just want to be accurate as to the details, when it happened, where it happened, how it happened, if there was something else involved. You don't need to write an essay, but you want to be accurate and concise about what happened. Number 3 is that you need to get prompt medical care. I'm not trying to suggest to anybody that they need to run to the emergency room every time they bang themselves or anything like that, but you want to get timely medical care. And what timely means kind of depends on the situation. You don't want to let things linger, because the longer you let things linger, the more that index of suspicion goes up. If you tweak your back tarping down a load and you don't get care for three or 4 weeks, what happens then is that the insurance company, your employer, starts looking at the situation saying, like, how do we know that he didn't hurt his back lifting dog food, doing something at home? Any number of ways that are not work-related. Like I said, that index of suspicion goes up, and you're going to be shuffled off to the fraud unit, which will make your life very, very difficult over the life of the claim. That's number 3, is you want to get prompt medical care. And obviously there are injuries that, broken bones, big, gaping cuts, these kinds of things where you need to get care right away, and everybody will understand that. But more often, people have things like torn cartilage where you don't necessarily realize exactly what you did right away, torn rotator cuffs, back and neck injuries, things of that nature where it's not a fracture, and a lot of guys will try and tough through it. The longer you try to tough through it, A, you're not going to get any better, for having tried to tough through it, but then B, that index of suspicion goes up, and it really will make your life that much more difficult. So number 3 is to get prompt medical care. The last thing that's really important that you do after an on-the-job injury deals with what happens the first time that you go into a doctor's office. Now, when you go into the doctor's office, one of the things that they do, the doctor in particular, is they do what they call take a history, and that's basically they ask you, what happened that's bringing you into the office today? When you give that history, you need to be concise and accurate as to what the starting point of your problem was. In other words, for example, if you tweak your back tarping down a load and you try to tough through it for 3, 4, 5 days, and finally enough's enough, and you get into the doctor's office or to the emergency room, the thing that you want to be careful to tell them is, I was tarping down a load and I tweaked my back, and it's gotten progressively worse over the last 3 to 5 days or whatever it is. What you don't want to say is that my back has been acting up the last three to 5 days without reference to the specific thing that happened to you at work. Because what happens after a claim gets going is, the insurance company is going to get your medical records, and they're going to look at these things very closely. And one of the things that they look at very, very closely indeed is that initial presenting history. In other words, what you told the healthcare provider the first time that you walked in the door. And if you don't make it clear that what happened to you at work is the starting point for the problems that you've got right now, you're inviting a world of problems. That's one of those things that increases your index of suspicion. It gives defense experts a solid ground for saying that your injuries are not work-related at all. And it can really jeopardize your right to get quality medical care, can jeopardize your ability to get ongoing benefits while you're off work, and eventually get a settlement at the end of the case, and can affect the value of the settlement as well. So giving that good, clean, concise history where you describe what happened to you at work as being the starting point for the problems that you've got right then and there is going to be really crucial. And it's something that I can't tell you how many times over the course of my career that initial presenting history has opened up a giant can of worms that have created a lot of problems for my clients. So being very careful about how you describe what brought you into the doctor's office, what brought you into the emergency room or the hospital is going to be very, very important in any type of workers' compensation case. And you want to be sure that you're making clear that what brought you in was work-related. Now, I'm not telling you that you should be denying having pre-existing problems. I'm not telling you that you should deny having prior injuries, especially if these things are things that have been the subject of prior workers' compensation claims, because the insurance companies are going to know about these anyway. And truthfully, your doctor needs to know about any kind of previous problems you had. But in a workers' compensation case, your burden ultimately is to show that your work accident was a cause, and your employer takes you the way that they find you. So basically what it comes down to is you can have pre-existing problems, you can have prior injuries, you can have all these issues that predated the accident, but what you want to be very careful to describe is that your work accident was the starting point for the problems that brought you in the door that day. And that's really all you have to do. But if you don't do that, you're really creating a lot of problems for yourselves. So that's number 4, is give a good, clean, concise, accurate history as to exactly what happened. When that doctor asks you, what's bringing you into my office, you make very clear to them that the starting point for the problems that you've got right now was something that happened at work. So those are the 4 things that you really need to do following a work accident. Number 1 is get the details down. Number 2, timely report the accident to your employer. Number 3, get prompt medical care. And the last is, once you're in the doctor's office, give a good, clean history, accurately describe your work accident as being the starting point for the injuries and the problems that you've got right then. Anyway, I hope this information has been helpful. I hope that you'll hit share so that other people in your network can benefit from this kind of information. If you have other questions about workers' compensation issues, you can certainly feel free to contact our office. The phone number is area code 312-263-1080. We help people really, throughout the whole state of Illinois, but we also offer referrals to well-qualified lawyers in other parts of the country. There's no cost or obligation up front for you if we do that. You can also get more information about workers' compensation issues through our website, www.rightsofinjuredtruckers. Hope this has been helpful. Thanks so much for watching.